Hi, this is Candace Crane, General Manager of Sheridan Honda and Power Sports. And this is I Want to Do That, Women Helping Women Explore the Outdoors. And today I'm talking to a fellow Wyomingite, Tana Hoffman Cook, about snowmobiling. So, Tana, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's my favorite topic to talk about.
Well, that's interesting because I was looking at your Instagram page and you have like every single hobby under the sun. I thought I was a crazy person having a lot of hobbies, and you have like done like even more than what I'm doing. So I can't wait to get in and learn a little bit more about you. But so Tana, I reached out to you because you're going to be conducting a women's snowmobiling clinic here in the Bighorn Mountains in February. February, I think, is it 17th or?
Actually, it's in early January, and I'm co-hosting it with Sled Wyoming.
Oh, early January. Okay, great. Yeah. So, so Sled Wyoming is a rental snowmobiling company here in Sheridan. They also, we sell BR pre-product or ski-doos, and they rent ski-doos. So definitely check them out here if you're local. That's why I reached out to you, because I saw that you were hosting this clinic, and I thought, well, this would be a fantastic guest to talk about snowmobiling. But tell me a little bit more about you. Obviously, we haven't met in person. We're doing this virtually. So you've got some exciting things in your background. Tell me a little bit more about what you're up to.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short, but I am originally from the East Coast, from up in New Hampshire, and I have spent the past 20 years working in the outdoor industry, in everything from retail to ski resorts and hospitality and production. And that has taken me to some of the best ski towns in the US and beyond. And I moved to Jackson about 10 years ago. I've been here down in Alpine, so down in Star Valley, a little south of Jackson. And I fell in love with snowmobiling, to keep it on topic, about 8 years ago. And excited to chat more about it.
So you were skiing, I think, before you were snowmobiling, correct?
Yeah, I started out skiing when I was very young. My family loved to do ski vacations, and then switched over to snowboarding when I was about 16, and got into backcountry when I lived in Colorado back in 2008, 2009. It just kind of progressed from there. I think a lot of people get into snowmobiling as an opportunity to get more access on their skis and snowboards. And what you may not realize, if that describes why you want to get into snowmobiling, is that you will start leaving your gear behind more and more. And one day you'll be like, wait, who am I?
I'm not a skier, I'm just a snowmobiler. Well, before we jump into that, I also want to just touch on, you are also passionate about connecting women into the outdoors. Obviously, that's a big part of the reason why I started this podcast. Was I grew up in the Midwest, and I did not have access to a lot of things that I have access to now living in the Mountain West. And what I found when I moved here a couple of years ago is that I kept saying, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do that, because I'd never really experienced it before. And as a woman, it can feel sometimes very intimidating to try to get into something new, especially if it's a group of men. And I think this particular topic in general, I still struggle with feelings of like inadequacy and intimidation. And I sell the product, but I'm just learning how to use the product. But so you started an organization that is helping women connect with other women outdoors. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. My background, as I mentioned, I've been in the outdoor industry for a really long time, since I was in my teens. And, it's traditionally a very male-dominated space. That has changed a lot over the past couple of decades, but we still have a long way to go. And I just found that, wherever I was working and whatever I was doing, I was always drawn to kind of these female-focused spaces and trying to create those opportunities, even just from a personal perspective, and, build women around me. And I feel like it's taken me 30 years to actually build a community of women around myself that do all the things I love to do and make me feel really supported and really confident in the outdoors. I think that we do that for each other. And so, I've been looking for ways to bring women-focused or a women-specific community to these sports arenas over the years. And for a while, it was through e-commerce. I had a equipment rental program that turned into a retail shop just for women in the outdoors. And yes, now I am running a online community and a real life adventure collective called ILA. It was started about 2 years ago, and it's our primary product is an app. We'll be in the App Store later this month or next month. But yes, I'm trying to actually make technology work for us. And just make it easier for women like myself and yourself to find each other at home and when we travel.
Yeah, I loved it. I actually signed up for it prior to the podcast, and I loved that it asked me so many different questions about my interests. And there was just a huge variety of interests, some of which I found myself saying, I've never done this, but I'm a first timer and I want to learn. And other interests I was, feeling a bit more experienced on and was willing to teach. But I think it's just a fantastic concept to help women align around our passion for the outdoors, and specifically to help guiding us when we're trying to start something new, like, for example, snowmobiling. I mean, it's a very male dominated sport. It's a heavy machine. It can seem very intimidating. So tell me about, like, you obviously kind of got into it. You said vis-a-vis skiing and snowboarding, but what how did you decide, I really want to make this a sport and dedicate time to this hobby?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned a lot of the barriers to snowmobiling. And another one is it's very financially,
That's a big component.
Yeah, it's, like many of these sports, especially in power sports, a lot of them not only take commitment to, I want to learn this, but they often take a really big investment. And I think one of the best ways to kind of break down that particular barrier is to connect women with potential mentors, and people that might have the opportunity to give them a taste, and kind of show them the ropes before they have to go and spend $1,000 on a rental and a clinic. So for me, I was extremely lucky. I was living in Tahoe, and my roommate out there, it was a very short roommate situation. I moved in and they moved out. And she and her husband at the time were moving up to Alaska to take a job. And we just really clicked. And so, that first winter, she invited me up to visit her in Alaska. And so I came up there as the, budding backcountry snowboarder. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, we have sleds, we'll, just come up and hang out with us." So I realized what an amazing opportunity that was. And that's not necessarily something that falls in people's laps, but
Really,
what came out of that was, being able to see these machines and what they can accomplish and the places they can take you right away. So seeing just what makes them so special, and then being able to experience that from the perspective of another woman.
Mm-hmm.
And having her be able to kind of show me the ropes really gave me the confidence after going up there for a few seasons of saying, okay, I can do this. I still need somebody to go with, because snowmobiling is not the kind of sport that you can start on your own. But it gave me the confidence to reach out to some friends that I knew in the area and say, I know that I'm new and I'm not going to come out on every ride, but can you make it worth it for me to invest in this machine if I really make the effort to go out and try to learn and try to, be a responsible rider. So it was a combination of things, but it was really having somebody extend the invitation was, absolutely the reason that I was able to get into this sport in the first place. And I think with the rise of women who are getting into this sport, and the accessibility to the machines and, rental companies like Sled.io, I think that there are a lot more opportunities for women to, plug in those communities where they can kind of get that invitation.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the woman that brought you in, how it's nice to have another woman that you're riding with. And I know one of my colleagues, and I had a similar experience, but she had a pretty extreme experience where she started riding with her boyfriend and some of his friends. And it almost ruined the sport for her initially, because the way that they rode was very aggressive, which she's learned to be a more aggressive rider. But those first few, really that first season out, she was just getting acclimated to a machine, and it was actually a much older machine than what they were riding on as well. So it was like, hey, you're new, you're not sure if you like the sport or not. So here's this 12-year-old machine that doesn't perform the way that our newer machines do. And then we're going to go out and ride really aggressively. And it almost, caused her to say, I don't want to do this anymore. Thankfully, the following year, she decided to try out some newer machines and eventually, like similar to you, invested in one. And it's completely changed her experience. But, I think that first time out, or the first few times out, if you don't have that mentor or guide that really can understand the level that you're at and just acknowledge and honor the comfort level that you have to be able to enjoy the experience, it's easy to say, I don't, between the cold and getting stuck and just the heaviness of the machine, like to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And, you never do it again. So I appreciate, you bringing that up and emphasizing how we as women can really encourage other women as well. So you obviously have all these hobbies, and why is it that you decided snowmobiling, of all the hobbies that you have, is something that you really want to dedicate time and effort into?
Well, I think it actually comes back to that investment piece that I was talking about. When you spend that amount of money on a machine, and there are ways to not spend that amount of money when you're getting into it, if you're kind of testing the waters. But if you decide that, you want to get into a sport that takes as much, time and training as something like snowmobiling is, I think that you really have to be ready to commit time to making it worth it. I've had people ask, oh, okay, or make the, I guess the, what's the word I'm looking for? Knowing that there is a big cost investment. But the way that I've explained it to a lot of individuals who are, looking at the investment that it requires, the way that it works for me is I really don't get out to the ski resort very much anymore. Even when I had access to a pass, I was going out 3 or 4 days just because I got accustomed to a different activity and riding with different people and going in different places. And now the way that I look at the investment in my sled is, when I go through a dealership and I do a loan and I'm paying a monthly payment and I use it for 3 years and then I sell it, I look at the amount of money that I spent over those 3 years, and it really isn't that much different than buying a pass to Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. Not to say that it's a cheap activity, because it is not. But it's just something that when you prioritize it, it really makes it worth it. And it makes me feel like, it's worth every penny, because it's what brings me joy for 4, sometimes 5 months out of the year. And what allows me to really unplug from the stresses of daily life. And it's just become the thing that really allows me to enjoy my winters. And to me, finding that balance is really worth the cost.
I totally agree. And I love how you put that. So what do you ride when you made an investment recently? What do you ride?
So right now, I'm on a Gen 4. It's a 2021 165 turbo. And I'm very excited to get onto the Gen 5, but I'm on a 3-year plan for my, for my finances. So I'll wait until they get all the bugs worked out, and then I'll get the new chassis. But my first sled, 2015 Summit X, I had a 54. Then I had a Summit X, 165. So this is the third sled that I've purchased, and looking forward to going back to a shorter track again next year.
Yeah.
I've always been on Skidoo. So funny. I've tried switching with some of my friends who ride Polaris, and we both are like toddlers, like we can't stay upright. So
I had the same experience. Yeah. I rode a lot of Polaris when I was in the Midwest, but it was very different riding. It was just kind of ditch riding. You're just going from point A to point B, which is fun. But moving to the mountains and experiencing mountain riding was a completely different type of riding than I'd ever experienced before. And obviously, Sheridan Power Sports is a proud partner of Skidoo, and so we sell their product. And so I was on a Skidoo, not a turbo. They wouldn't let me try the demo turbo. Maybe this year I can talk somebody into it. But last year I was just on the Summit X, and it's so fun. And I was riding people that had Polaris as well. And it's interesting. There are subtle differences, but the subtleties actually, you can feel them, and you just kind of get used to a particular way that the sled rides, and that particular manufacturer, how they invest in the technology. And it's awkward when you're switching. So obviously I'm a proponent of Skidoo, but there's a lot of other really good sleds out there.
I think with any sport that you do and any equipment, your body builds muscle memory. I started on Skidoo when I was going up to Alaska, because that's what all my friends rode up there. So, I think that's one thing that can make the learning curve really difficult. You mentioned earlier having the older sled. That certainly, technology and engineering has made these machines a lot easier to ride. But also, if you're switching to different sleds every single time, I think there is a strategy behind that to figure out, if you demo different machines, to find out which one you like better at the beginning. But I think that the sooner you pick one, like you'll be able to ride whatever you choose, but it's all, consistency and seat time. So I think it's just important to be able to own your sled, whatever that sled ends up being.
Yeah, and I like your whole 3-year philosophy. Obviously, there's a financial component that's wrapped up in that as well. But I think that's a good point, because you know, with every season and even with every ride, you just get more and more comfortable, especially just given the sheer size and the weight of these machines. And if you are riding, if you are doing mountain riding, it's a lot more active than the riding that I was used to in the Midwest. And again, there's nothing wrong with that kind of riding. That's a lot of fun. It's a lot more social, and I've got a lot of friends that have gotten their kids involved in it at a younger age, because it's just less. You know, when you're just kind of ditch riding, it's easier to get your kids involved versus when you're mountain riding. But when you are mountain riding and you're having to move that machine, you do get used to how the machine moves. And so I totally agree with you. I never even really thought about it that way, but like making that commitment and that investment for a few years before you take that leap and then have that learning curve, you know, all over again. So, so tell me about, what was your like favorite snowmobiling experience that you ever had? I'm sure you've had a lot of them, but like, what is your like just number one top favorite experience that you ever had snowmobiling?
I realize you just made it really clear to give you one, but I'm going to have to give you two.
Okay, good.
The first one, so I went up to Alaska 4 seasons in a row to go up to Thompson Pass and kind of stay up there for anywhere from, you know, a week to 2 weeks doing backcountry. And, you know, obviously every year was amazing, and just being in those mountains is really special. Very different snowpack, very different terrain. But the last year that I went up there, my group of friends up there set up, we had kind of our own little base camp. We called it Boss Camp. But we had like, you know, full platform and canvas tents set up. So like a little outfitters village. And yeah, out at Thompson Pass, and just being out there with the Aurora Borealis overhead, and just being out there with a whole bunch of friends and exploring glaciers. And I think, you know, I spoke to this at the beginning, but just what the real benefit is, like, yes, it helps me clear my head. Yes, powder turns are really fun. But I think when you just realize where these machines can take you, and that often you end up in places that 100, 1,000 people might be able to experience in their life when you're in really remote areas, it can be just, you know, a very philosophic experience. And so that's something that I really, really love about sledding and about the mountain sledding community. And then on the other side, just last year, you were in Wyoming. We had an incredible snow year. It never stopped. It started early and it never stopped. And I just remember a particular weekend last year. So where I live, we're so lucky. My husband and I bought our house here in Alpine about 7 years ago, and we're sled in, sled out to some of the best riding that Star Valley has to offer. And so, you know, that allows me to get a lot of seat time, because we can go out for a 2-hour ride as opposed to having to spend the entire day. But there was a week last year in April where it snowed. I want to say it was like a 48-inch storm. And, you know, we went out one day not really expecting much. And it was just, you'd stop your sled and it disappeared. It was, there was so much snow. And just kind of having this moment, you know, the opposite of where these sleds can take you. I was like, I can't believe that I'm doing this like 15 miles from my house. And I think it was the deepest snow I've ever been in on a sled. Just
that late in the season too. Like, what a gift!
In the spring, like we thought it was over, and it was just absurd. So just every time I think about that, it just kind of makes me giggle.
Well, that makes me wish for more snow. We're crossing our fingers here and hoping that it's going to arrive. I know the Farmer's Almanac said that we were supposed to get even more snow this year than last year. So
there's still a lot of winter left.
There's still a lot of winter left. So let's get a little bit more technical for people that are listening that are thinking, gosh, I love this. I've been wanting to try this, and this is exactly the inspiration I needed to get going. So what type of terrain do you recommend that riders start on? Obviously, my experience was not in the mountains, but I live in the mountains now. So what do you recommend for people that are just looking to start learning how to snowmobile?
So if you've never, ever, ever, ever been on any type of snowmobile, I do recommend, you know, you can take a tour. I realize that, you know, for some people that's an unnecessary expense, but like instead of renting it and having to trailer it and like figuring out how to start it and doing all these things, unless you have a group of friends, obviously, you know, the best thing is if you have friends who are offering to take you out. But if you don't have any ins and you're really looking to get into it, go sign up for a tour somewhere, because it gives you the opportunity to just get a feel for the machine, learn a little bit from the guide. Maybe that guide takes you out to a zone where then in the future, you'll feel more comfortable, renting a sled to get out to. But obviously, learning where those really safe zones are, backcountry riding and mountain riding brings in a whole other element of risk that most, other sports don't really bring with them. Avalanches are real. Yeah. And, snow safety is really important. I think another way to get in before it's even like what terrain do you get into, that whole element of breaking into the community, looking for either backcountry focused groups or a snowmobile club. A lot of snowmobile clubs, yes, a lot of them have like the hill climb element, but they're so family friendly. There's so many families that use that as their opportunity to, spend time with their kids and spend time with their neighbors. And that can be a really, really great opportunity to go to if they're doing an Avi awareness night or even, a fun fundraiser to show up to one of those early in the season. And you might be surprised who you meet. And, you may end up meeting, the dad who has like, a teenage son, a wife, and a daughter who they like to take out on, the club rides on the weekends. And, oh, by the way, we have an extra sled. Would you like to come out with us sometime? So I think that the snowmobile community, there's a lot of different users in the snowmobile community. And the one that's always promoted on Instagram isn't necessarily, the segment of riders that you're going to find in your backyard. And they're, really fun riders, and I ride with a lot of them. But there's also this whole kind of like less promoted community of snowmobilers that really just want to see the community grow. And, they're the ones that are helping pull together the fundraisers to make sure that your favorite access points are staying groomed and that your favorite trailheads are getting all of the parking plowed out, and helping to keep access open, in public lands. So, before you even get into that, if you don't have an in yet, start looking for those communities, because if you're near a mountain town or if you're pretty much anywhere in the northern US, there's one nearby.
Yeah, that's great. I actually did a tour when I went to Jackson solo. I took my dog last year, and I did a snowmobiling tour, and it was just so fun to be on the groomed trails. It's a completely different experience than like when I go out with my friends, or with guests or clients, whatever, here in town. And it was just a completely different experience. And I was like, why don't I do this more often? Like, I love this. Like, it's just, you don't have, your trails are groomed, but they gave us some open spaces to play in a little bit. And we were with riders of all different experience levels. And the snowmobile was a lot more sturdy because it's not, it's designed for touring, not for necessarily mountain riding. So, I think those are fantastic options. You mentioned a little bit about like getting access to snowmobiles if you don't have them, and getting into clubs or groups and having, potentially getting access to other people's. What about like renting? Do you promote renting before you buy? Obviously you had experience prior to buying sledding, or snowmobiling. So what do you recommend for people who are like, gosh, I've never even been on one. I want to just try to see if I even like it. And I don't know necessarily anybody that does it, or I'm intimidated by people that do it. What other options do they have? Should they check out renting?
Yeah, absolutely. With renting, and to kind of piggyback onto the idea of tours, there are a lot of places that do mountain tours. So, that's a great opportunity to take out actual mountain sleds. It doesn't have to be a trail tour. But, I know like Sled Wyoming and Sheridan, obviously they're BRP, so they're Skidoo. But maybe you go somewhere else and take a tour with somebody that has Polaris, because I think it does make a difference. I don't think you need to try every sled, and most people probably don't have the money to demo every sled, but at least to, get a feel of, what's the difference between these, kind of two leading brands, and is there one that feels more comfortable to me? So you don't always have to go out with a tour, but if you're new enough, unless you have people to go with, renting and going out by yourself, I wouldn't, or, just with another person, I wouldn't really advise it. Just because you don't know enough about the machinery. In case something were to happen. But I think that, the other opportunity is, yes, there are clinics, and beginner clinics that often include the sled rental. Some of those are more expensive than others. But again, I think that, starting with snowmobile clubs, and just getting to meet those people, sometimes you'll learn about opportunities that they might have through a local dealership. Maybe they give club members a special deal, and so I think it's worth just getting to know your local community first, and that'll help you a long way in getting to that next step of getting out with your equipment.
Yeah, totally. We get 2 demo sleds every year. We could take probably more on if we wanted to, but and we use them exactly how you described, right? If there's a customer that's interested in buying a particular sled, we'll take them out on the demo. But also, if there's people that are just like, I want to get into this, I want to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
We'll take them out and spend an afternoon with them and helping them to feel more comfortable on the sled. So my next question is, do you recommend women listeners try to find other women as they're learning this sport in particular? Or, do you think that doesn't matter as much? Obviously, it is a male dominated sport and it's going to be more challenging to find women. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's something very special and irreplaceable about having an experience going out with a group of women. But to your point, I know that that's not always possible. I did get my first experiences on a sled with another woman in the group. And that was special. But when I came back to Jackson, I didn't know any women here who rode.
Really? When you really?
I bought my sled and I knew a couple guys that had taken us out to basically get ski runs. And, I was like, well, if they were patient enough to take us out and they wanted to ride in between dropping us off so that we could come down on our snowboard, maybe they would be patient enough to let me, tag along on a sled. And so I think what it really comes down to is just that group dynamic, whether or not you're out with women or learning from women. I think that just having the expectation of, making sure that expectations are really clear. And, knowing that if you're a beginner rider, somebody needs to be patient, and just having you tag along with the group, in the back is not going to be, is not going to be productive. So having somebody who, is happy to actually take you out and kind of be that mentor, again, watching my friend Jamie ride, she had also kind of started. So she wasn't necessarily the best rider when I first went out there. But, every time I went out, not only did I see her progressing, but I saw how patient and supportive the guys that she rode with were. And that gave me confidence to be like, okay, I can find some people to ride with. I do think learning from a spouse is, yes. I both started riding about the same time. So we were able to learn together, which balanced out that power dynamic. But I will give a pro tip, for any guys that are trying to get your wife or girlfriend into it. If you do have an extra sled, you take the crappy one, and because you doing, loop-de-loops and bow ties around them while they struggle to get it right is probably going to make it the worst day possible.
And they're never going to want to do it again. So yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, totally fantastic advice. So let's talk about gear, because obviously you can have access to the sled, but you have to make sure that you're protected, and you are a gear expert. So what are the things that us newer riders, what do we need to have? What do we need to invest in? What can we borrow? Talk about gear.
Yeah. So to start with, the most important things that you absolutely should buy first, a helmet.
Okay.
With that helmet, don't ever buy used. You can buy cheap ones. You can always find stuff on clearance. I also highly recommend getting goggles that are by the same manufacturer, because that means that they're designed to fit securely without any holes. So you're not going to get that ice cream headache or have snow or anything coming through. So if you get a 2B helmet, get 2B goggles. 509, get 509. That's just going to make your life easier. They're not that expensive, but don't try to use your ski goggles because you're going to be very disappointed.
Okay. That's funny that you said that, because that totally happened to me and I didn't realize. I was like, why is this not working?
It doesn't have the nose piece, so your nose is going to be cold. You're going to have cold here. So yeah, helmet and goggles, buy those as a set. The second thing you're going to want, so for boots, I've seen people come out in Sorels or muck boots. That works for trail riding. It does not work for mountain riding. If you're a snowboarder and you want to use your snowboard boots, use old ones. I will tell you right now, if you wear your brand new snowboard boots, it's going to destroy them. The running boards are designed to hold your tread on, and they will just absolutely destroy your boots. So if you have an old pair, that's one thing. Otherwise, buy a pair of insulated snowmobile boots. Again, you can find them on clearance. You can find old ones. But yeah, boots, helmet and goggles. And then knee pads. Some of the women's mono suits, they'll come with like a thin little knee pad built into it. That doesn't do anything. You're going to have bruised knees every time. It's going to be uncomfortable. You can use your biking knee pads. You can buy cheap ones from Walmart from the kids section. It doesn't matter, but have something on your knees. And then, this is a whole other conversation, but if you're just starting out, hopefully you're staying out of any avalanche prone zones. But if you are going with individuals who are taking you into areas that could potentially have avalanche consequences, then, once you buy your helmet and your goggles and your boots, the other thing that you need to get is your beacon, your shovel, and your probe. And you need to know how to use it. And you need to go out and practice with your partners. Whether or not you take a formalized avalanche level 1 right off the bat, which I understand is asking a lot of a new rider, but making sure that you know what your equipment does, where you need to have it on your body, how to turn it on, how to use it, and that you've practiced with your riding partners. But
like even if you're not in avalanche country and you get, you go next to a tree and you get stuck in deep snow, like you're in, I mean, it's an experience. Like you're covered, you're in it. You got to make sure that you've got warm layers on, that you're protected, your outer gear is protected. I love monosuits. I struggle with snow pants, and I like bibs too, but the monosuit for me just feels like the best protection that I can get. I know it's not for everybody, but I think, to your point, like even if you're not, in avalanche country, you could still get into some deep snow, and you got to get yourself out of it, and it's going to be cold and it's going to be wet, and you need to make sure that you are protected.
Yeah. On top of all those protective layers that I mentioned and the safety equipment, not wearing cotton is just a very easy guideline. Cotton absorbs moisture. It'll make you cold. So just making sure that you're wearing synthetic fabrics underneath, layering, just like you do when you go on like a big hike or anything that's aerobic, because you will be freezing at the beginning of the trail and you will be dying of sweat halfway through when you get your sled stuck and you have to get it out. Another thing, that I think a lot of people don't think about is overdressing. People, sometimes early on in their backcountry, or I should say early on in their mountain riding experience, have a lot of issues with fogging up their goggles. They're like, what goggles don't fog up? It's not your goggles. It's that you're wearing too much, or you have your breath box on your helmet and it's causing all of this steam. In your goggles. Or you're wearing a balaclava and 3 layers. And you're so hot that heat is coming up and it's going into your goggles. So, dressing, I really don't wear very much. I wear a thin wool layer, and then I have a very thin puffy that I wear, and I sometimes end up taking that off. But I'm cold when I'm going into the mountains, but it's because I know that I'm going to heat up very quickly. And then to your point, I love my mono suit. It's so comfortable. For women, everyone says, what brand? If you're buying a mono suit that is designed specifically for mountain snowmobiling, I really do believe that, for the amount of riding a new rider will be doing, any of those are going to, keep you, dry. Maybe if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you might want to look into getting one that's like super waterproof. I ride for TD and they have extremely waterproof, amazing materials. But for women, I think if you're going to splurge on a mono suit, the 2 things I would say to look for, one is to have a drop seat. It just makes that means that there's a zipper around your hips and allows you to go to the bathroom without having to take off all of your gear.
The whole thing, yeah.
And then the other thing is try a bunch on, buy the one that is the most comfortable and fits you the best. If Tubi is listening, I'm sorry, I know that's not what you want to hear. And I do love Tubi. And I think that, if somebody's looking for, the driest, best backcountry gear, I think they're it. But I think that for most women starting out, the suit that fits you and is most comfortable and the one that you're going to wear, that's the best suit for you. Because I know that certain brands of women's suits, I put my arms up. I'm very tall and I have very long extremities. And there are some women's suits where I can't, once I lock the bottom of my cuff into my boots, it feels like it's going to rip when I sit down because the inseam isn't long enough. And it comes up here when I put my arms over my head. And women come in all shapes and sizes. And so do the mono suits, they're not all built the same. So I think that trying a bunch on, the one that allows you to move, that has that isn't skin tight, because that's also going to make you cold when you don't have that space, kind of like insulating air. That's going to be the best mono suit for you.
Yeah, I love the idea of trying them on. I am petite and curvy, so I have challenges with the length, but also when I can be standing up and have something on. And this is what my problem is with snow pants. Like I can put them on and I'm standing up and I'm like, oh, okay, this feels okay. And then the minute I try to bend down or like pick something up, I can't. My mobility is limited based on how the garment fits me. So definitely with the mono suits, and I think that they are. Even in the few years that I've been in the power sports industry, I've seen an evolution in women's gear. Like it seems like we just in the past, handful of years that women's gear is really becoming more and more prominent. So it used to be that you only had a couple of options and they were all like hot pink. And now there's a lot more for us to try on. So don't be afraid, to your point of, getting in there is probably not something that you're going to buy online. Like go into a store, try it on, make sure that it feels good for you, because there's nothing worse than doing a sport and having your gear not fit you right, or like you said, having it be fogged up. And I'd never heard of buying helmet and goggles from the same brand, and that's like such an aha moment for me, because we obviously sell a lot of different brands in our store, and I see people just kind of grabbing what they think looks cool, and it never occurred to me to say, hey, you should probably buy the same brand so that the fit aligns and you don't get the fogginess and all the stuff that you get if the fit isn't there. So
you don't have to have a matching kit, but when you consider the fact that hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent on R&D and engineering, sometimes it makes sense just to buy things that were designed to go together.
Totally. So a couple of just final questions for you, Tana. So the people that are listening, they're like, man, I really want to do this. I've been wanting to do it. My husband's been asking me to do it, or my boyfriend, my brother, my dad, or whatever, my friends. And I really want to do it, but I'm still just feeling intimidated, right? Like I see their pictures and I see where they go. And what if I get out there and I am too scared? Or what if I can't keep up with their pace? Or what if I fall off my sled? Or what if I get buried? And like, how do I even know how to turn it on? Like, what advice would you give to these women that are listening that really want to try this, but are just still feeling a bit too intimidated to just get over the hump?
I feel a little bit repetitive, but like with everything else in life, it's all about who you know and the people around you. Whether you're a beginner or whether you're at the expert level where you're going into, 100-mile runs into really big mountain ranges, the number one most important thing when you're at, the top of your game and you're, Chris Brandt, is still who's around you, because when they get in tricky situations, they need to know that they can rely on their group and that they feel supported. And I think that that's true for anyone at any ability. So, if you're still, if you really want to get into this and you just don't know where to start, I would start by looking locally, look at the local dealerships and any local snowmobile clubs. If there's a local dealership, walk in and look for the first woman in uniform.
Totally.
Or ask the person behind the desk, do any women work here?
Yes.
Hopefully there's someone there. Look for people on, social media. Reach out to those individuals that you follow, or someone that you look up to, or someone who inspires you. And 9 times out of 10, I think women really want to see more women in this industry. And I know that whenever anyone reaches out to me, I'm always very happy to share resources and tell them where to go, or offer advice when I can. And then look at your local, snowmobile clubs. Also, I would also look at any women specific kind of backcountry education. It doesn't have to be sled specific, but I find that, if there's a women's, AVI awareness course or class or something like that, it might be a lot of skiers and snowboarders, but it would surprise me if there weren't 1 or 2 women at that event who have the same interest level as you and maybe want to tag team getting into the sport together, or know someone or getting into it and are willing to kind of take you under their wing. But for mountain riding, if you really want to commit to mountain riding, I think the best thing that you can do is start to build the community and use backcountry awareness and backcountry safety as a gateway to meet more people, because those are going to be the people that you need around you when you start getting more into the sport and as you progress.
I love that. So one of my previous guests, Chrissy Lohoff, she's the director of our ski patrol of Antelope Butte, our local mountain here. And she was just in the store yesterday because their organization purchased a snowmobile from us. And we had this conversation about how she was like super excited to have it because they need it as a resource. But also she's like, can you come up and give me some instruction on how to ride? And I was like, I'm not the person to come give you instruction, but I know somebody at our store that can, and I'm going to come with so that we can learn together. And as you were talking, it just like occurred to me, like, yeah, there's so many women that I think have experience in other areas outdoors and would love to start this with another woman. They just don't know, So like, I'm even thinking of like my friend Chrissy Lohoff, like, hey, Chrissy, what about if, she's an accomplished ski patroller. She's an accomplished skier. Like, what about if we learn this to snowmobile together? Like she has experience backcountry and experience that I don't have. We're both learning on the machine, So I think that's fantastic advice that you don't necessarily have to know somebody who even knows how to sled. If you know someone who enjoys the outdoors and maybe has some experience with, backcountry, they might want to get into it as well. So
and just making sure that you keep everything, squarely within your comfort zone and, within your ability levels, because you can progress together. But just making sure that you give yourself, like anything, you want to give yourself small milestones and small achievements. And before we wrap that one up, I'll just plug quickly Illa.
Yes, I was just going to say,
the whole point there, it's hard to find people. It always bugged me that there were so many women that do all of these sports, but I couldn't bring them to mind. Or you just like, it's not like if you're into CrossFit, you go to the gym and you're going to find CrossFit people, like other than waiting around at the trailhead. Like, how do you meet other women that do these things?
Yes.
And so, with Illa, I've seen it. I saw it over the summer where, there was a group of women that met on Illa. Somebody reached out and basically said, I just bought a dirt bike. I don't know what I'm doing. Does anybody want to go out with me? And they ended up meeting up every Sunday at the local mini track and like progressing with each other over the course of the summer. And so, if you want to sign up for Illa and you find someone in your area, Illa is all about starting conversations. So my dream is that it'll help, new riders find mentors and, mentors find, other riding partners. So I think it is
also
really
fly fishing. You have fly fishing on there. You have camping on there. You've got surfing on there. I mean, it's not just power sports related, just to make sure that our listeners know that, because like I said, when I went on and signed up, I would love to find other women fly fishermen. That's one of my passions. I love it a lot. I'm still learning. And I'm learning with my fiance, because so kind of similar to you and your husband, like we're learning together. He's actually an accomplished fisherman, but not fly fisherman. So we're kind of learning that aspect together. But I would love to have other women that I can learn to fly fish with. And I saw surfing on there. I saw walking on there and camping, and just, there was just tons of activities. So it's if power sports aren't your thing, but you still want to connect with women in the outdoors, definitely check out Illa. And, I'm looking forward to meeting some women on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Tana. This has been super helpful. I don't know that I'm going to see you when you're out here at the Bighorns, but actually I thought it was in February. So now that it's in January, I might try to see if I can make that work, because I was going to be out of town when I originally thought it was. But regardless, hopefully one day our crowds will pass in person and we can do some fun stuff together. I also would like to learn how to dirt bike ride. So if you can connect me to those gals too, that would be great.
Absolutely. I know there's some on your side of the state. So we'll have to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out Illa yet, definitely check it out. ILLA.com, correct? Or you can get it on, it's going to be coming to the App Store soon, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's Illa Women, ILLA women.com. And from there you can create a profile. So, and hopefully it'll be in the App Store within the next few weeks.
All right. And do your snow dance, because we need some snow up here too.
No kidding.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.